welcome everyone. I hope that everyone found the link okay. On behalf of Great Swamp Watershed Association and myself, I am glad that you have joined us here for our first virtual live stream of the Great Swamp Watershed report card. We hope that you're all doing well, practicing your social distancing, and still getting a little outside time. We are happy to announce that our conservation management area at Tiger Lily Lane is still open, and we hope that you're all enjoying that area. Great Swamp Watershed Association is working hard, especially in these times, to provide the information and the data that helps to keep the Passaic River and the surrounding towns water clean. What we do is we advocate, we have stewardship and land preservation. We work with local communities using a sound science background and data that we collect throughout the year to promote clean and healthy water for everyone in the area. The Passaic River provides drinking water for over 2.5 million people in the state of New Jersey. That's a really important resource. Resources like that need to be protected year-round and even during these times. All right, so in 2017, Great Swamp Watershed Association expanded our mission statement from just keeping an eye on the waters in the Great Swamp Watershed to keeping an eye on the waters and protecting the waters throughout the entire Passaic River region. We expanded from this immediate area, which is the Great Swamp sub-watershed, and we took our first steps downstream along the Passaic, sampling from Millington Gorge all the way out to Livingston. 2019 is a culmination of the first 3 years of that expansion. Starting in 2020, we have begun a further expansion and are now sampling along the Passaic River down as far as Little Falls. The report card that we're going to talk about today covers the data that we collected in 2019. That data is collected through the work of a huge number of people. I have a wonderful team of stream team volunteers, citizen scientists, who come to classes, learn the methods and the protocols that we need to use for sampling, and then go out on their own and with myself and other GSWA staff members to sample and collect all of the data that we'll be talking about today. One of the things that we need to talk about when we talk about water quality is climate. The current climate really has an impact on what happens in the water quality throughout the year. Climate over the last 3 years has been historic, to say the least. We've seen the wettest 12-month period in recorded history from July through 2018 to 2019 in August. These extreme wet weathers have a big impact on what's happening in our streams. We have extended drought periods followed by heavy, impactful rain events that cause erosion and flooding downstream, as well as habitat destruction and erosion upstream. Combined with the extremely hot temperatures that we had in 2019, 10 out of the 12 months in 2019 saw above average temperatures. This combination really has an impact on growth within our streams, things like algae growth. Many of the news stories over the summer last year talked about harmful algal blooms in our lakes. That also has an impact on our rivers and what's going on there as well. So all of these climate effects can really begin to impact our water quality overall in our streams. All right, so what type of monitoring does Great Swamp Watershed Association do? What we do is chemical monitoring 4 times a year. We use a combination of handheld meters as well as lab samples that we send out to a certified New Jersey laboratory. We sample for chemistry, phosphorus, nitrogen, nutrients, road salts. Visual assessments, again, that stream team of citizen scientists, volunteers that works with Great Swamp Watershed Association in 2019 helped to collect data twice a year, spring and fall, in 22 sites throughout our sampling area. We use New Jersey DEP protocols, which enables us to submit our data to New Jersey DEP. We also cover bacteria monitoring in the summer, 21 sites in 2019 over 5 consecutive weeks, starting in July and going through August. Finally, macroinvertebrate sampling, 12 sites in 2019 on all the streams in our area. We use macroinvertebrates to be able to tell us what's going on a more long-term basis. And in 2019, we completed our microplastic sampling protocols, which started in 2018. We increased actually to 17 sites in 2019. I forgot to mention in the beginning, if anyone has any questions as we're going along, you can feel free to type them in the comments, and I have someone here who will allow me to know that you have some questions. I can answer as I go, or we'll answer some at the end as well. All right, chemical parameters. To go a little more in depth here. These are the different parameters that we sample for when we're out in the streams 4 times a year. We look at pH, temperature, dissolved oxygen, flow, nitrogen, phosphorus, road salts, and water clarity. These are our sites for 2019. They cover in the bright green all of the historic Great Swamp Subwatershed sites, as well as our expanded sites down along the Passaic River, starting in Millington and working up through Livingston. Our findings for 2019. Overall, we saw elevated nutrient levels during the dry periods of the year. So we talked earlier about how we had heavy rainfalls through the spring of 2019. Going into the summer and the early fall, we saw a period of drought. As the flow decreases within our streams, we see a concentrating of the nutrients in the water. A lot of the water in the lower Passaic River comes from effluent inputs from wastewater treatment plants. And if there's no rainwater diluting that effluent, we can see higher levels of nutrients, which are impactful to our streams, and that they can cause that harmful algal bloom or excessive plant growth, as well as having an impact on the macroinvertebrates that live within the streams. The Passaic River, again below Millington Gorge, saw more of that impacts from those lower levels. Dissolved oxygen levels were impacted by the high temperatures. Dissolved oxygen is a gas contained within the water, and it's directly impacted by the temperature of the water. The cooler the water is within the stream, the larger quantity of dissolved oxygen it can hold. So as we have prolonged hot, warmer periods of air temperature through the season, the water temperature in the streams begins to increase, having an impact on how much dissolved oxygen can be kept within that water and available for the fish and the macroinvertebrates that live there. Road salts have seen an overall decrease as we've had milder winters, less snowstorms, less ice storms. However, in early 2019, we saw a number of predicted storms that became rain events. A lot of our local communities use brining. You see those stripes of salt on the roads before a storm. When that happens, when we have a rain event instead of a snow or an ice event, what begins to happen is the runoff carries that salt more quickly into the streams, and that can begin to show some impact. So we saw some elevated numbers, but overall, with a decrease in the severe winter weather type storms, we've seen a decrease in our salt levels in our streams. Visual assessments, again, as I mentioned, we do this twice a year. I have a team of volunteers who go out in pairs or as family groups, and they're able to go out to different stream stretches throughout the area and collect the data. Again, we use New Jersey DEP protocols for that. Twice a year, I normally give training classes. Under the current conditions, we're being encouraged and forced to come up with new and different ways to get that data and that information on how to collect a visual assessment along a stream reach in different ways. So if you head over to our Great Swamp Watershed Association website after our talk today, you will find that parts 1 and 2 of a self-guided stream assessment training class are already up on our website, with part 3 to come out next week, as well as a little self-quiz to make sure that you're understanding the information. So hopefully we'll be able to still get folks out to the stream assessment areas when things start to get back to normal. In 2019, again, our spring assessments and fall assessments were very different. So a lot of our spring assessments were actually delayed due to the heavy flooding and rain events that we had in the spring of 2019. And what those assessments found when my teams finally got out was higher levels of erosion, higher levels of scouring, many more trees down in our streams due to all the storm events that we had happened. Specifically, Primrose Brook and the Wantica Brook within the watershed saw high impacts from this erosion and flooding. Great Brook as well saw a buildup of sediment. So the erosion upstream, as it carries the dirt and debris with it downstream, as the stream flow slows down, that dirt and debris starts to fall out, building up sediment islands and having an impact on macroinvertebrate habitat along the way. In the fall, we saw the opposite. A lot of our, due to the drought in the early fall, a lot of our fall assessments saw low amounts of flow and water within our streams. Increased algae growth, especially in our slower moving areas. Black Brook in particular was hit with algae blooms within the stream reaches. All right, we also sample for bacteria. E. coli is a type of bacteria found in the intestines. It can get into our streams in a number of ways, sometimes through septic systems that haven't been maintained properly, sometimes through sewage leaks. Some bacteria in the water is natural and expected, especially in the areas that are forested where you have wildlife. When it rains, the bacteria and the pollution can get carried into the water. But high levels of E. coli bacteria in the water can have implications to human health. It can be possible health risk. So what we do with our E. coli sites is we monitor specifically sites where people are most likely to interact with the water. So areas where we have boat launches, where we're in a public park, those type of areas. 2019 and 2018, GSWA was asked to partner with New Jersey DEP on their monitoring. New Jersey DEP follows a pattern of bacteria monitoring that rotates throughout the areas of the state. In 2018 and 2019, they were within the Passaic River region, and we were able to assist them in their sampling. We sampled 9 different sites for them. All right, so for results for 2019, GSWA data showed that our weather, our climate had a serious impact on our results. So we sampled over 5 consecutive weeks. The first 2 weeks saw warm, sunny, dry weather, and our numbers were very low, with almost more than half of our sites coming in below the single day numbers that the New Jersey DEP sets out for us. However, the 3rd week saw significant rain event, and that had a lot of our sites seeing a jump in the bacteria numbers. This is not uncommon. Again, that stormwater runoff brings in detritus and debris, as well as animal waste that hasn't been cleaned up, and so we often see a spike in numbers after a significant rainfall. That number gets to be higher when we have a significant rainfall after a period of drought, as happened in our 3rd week. So overall, we had better numbers, though with that peaking high numbers in the 3rd week, some of our overall averages leveled out. Spring Garden Brook in Madison was seeing high numbers even during our dry weeks. We worked with the town to sample further upstream along that brook, trying to locate and isolate a potential area where that could be getting into the water. We were unable to pinpoint a specific area, but we intend to work with them again in the spring to follow up on that and hopefully find out what's causing those elevated numbers along that stream reach. The New Jersey DEP data has not yet been shared with us. With everything that's going on, things are a little slow. So, macroinvertebrates. We use macroinvertebrates, as I said earlier, as a long-term data set. Macroinvertebrate sampling allows us to look at organisms that live for multiple years within the stream reach. And by categorizing them into groups which have different levels of pollution tolerance, we can really get an idea of what's going on long-term in our streams. Our results for 2019, overall, again, we saw better numbers in 2019 for our macroinvertebrate populations. Many of our streams had increases in diversity as well as the density of the organisms, so we had higher quantities of a wider range of organisms, indicating a really healthy ecosystem. Lawantica Brook, which tends to be one of our more impacted streams, starting in a more populated area, had a significant decrease, however. But there's two reasons. There's multiple things going on. In Lawantica Brook, we sampled just below Kitchell Pond, and due to weather in 2018, we had two different trees come down in the pond, just below, in the brook, just below the pond, right above where we sampled. In 2019, the Parks Commission came in and cleared all of that out, allowing the sediment to wash out through the system. And that had an impact both on scouring of the macroinvertebrates when we had heavy rains, so they kind of get washed away a little with not as much habitat to hold on to, as well as some of the sediment that had backed up behind those trees, filling in between the rocks and building up and decreasing the habitat. So we're hoping as we move forward and the stream settles back out into a normal, natural condition that we'll see those macroinvertebrate numbers increase again. Silver Brook, which runs through our conservation management area, we are preparing, thanks to a grant from New Jersey EQIP program, to do some restoration along the Silver Brook on the conservation management area site and the Harding Land Trust site. And so we sampled two sites along there for macroinvertebrates to get a baseline to see what's going on now before we do the restoration. Silver Brook traditionally has been straightened by farming practices in the past, and so what we're going to do is restore that habitat so it's a healthier habitat for both fish and macroinvertebrates, and it shows an improved water quality with that program. In 2019, we continued our microplastic study. 2018, we had our pilot study. We collected samples. We examined them here in the office. In 2019, through some generous grants from the Watershed Institute and the LaVigne Foundation, we were able to expand that study. Looking at microplastics at 15 locations, we sent our samples out to New Jersey City University for a more in-depth analysis of what was actually in the samples. They use a digestin process, which allows them to digest off any organic material, leaf litter, and detritus that's in the sample, so that as they're examining the sample, they're looking specifically at the plastics in the water. Microplastics in our water pose a health risk to everyone, not just the organisms, the fish and the macroinvertebrates, birds, turtles that live and utilize the stream, but also a human health risk as those microplastics can work their way up the food chain. So this has been a really important study for us. We used 7 new locations in 2019. A lot of those sites were selected based on the data we collected in 2018. We sampled upstream of sites that had high concentrations of microplastics, again to try and determine potential inputs for those plastics from the surrounding areas. Overall, our sampling sites in red were our initial sampling sites in 2018. The yellow sites are the sites where we expanded our study. We saw fewer larger particles in 2019 than we did in 2018. We attribute this to the weather conditions when we were sampling. In 2018, we were sampling during a period of heavy rain and flooding, so we had a lot of inputs from the surrounding area, a lot of runoff carrying plastics into the water. In 2019, when we were sampling, was in the early fall when we were seeing those drought conditions. So flow was lower, as well as inputs from the surrounding community were lower. We suspect that that had an impact on the larger particles that may have come in. Larger particles of microplastics like chip plastics from broken down bottles, pieces of film plastic from cellophane and packaging material, small nodules of plastic that come from industrial cleaners and scouring materials, and polystyrene. So our highest quantities in 2019 were actually microfibers, which often come from doing laundry when we wash. Synthetic fabrics, those microfiber, plastic fabric fibers, can break off and be washed out into the streams with the wash water. And so we saw higher quantities of those types of particles in the water, as well as a fairly consistent quantity of polystyrene. Again, our stormwater sampling, unfortunately, due to weather conditions and the drought in the fall, we were unable to conduct follow-up stormwater sampling. So that particular part of our project is still on hold, though we look forward to completing that project as soon as conditions allow us to get back out and do the microplastic sampling. What we have done with our microplastics data is really important. We have worked with a number of local communities to help pass important legislation and ordinances reducing the amount of single-use plastics in our communities. This reduction of plastics in the communities is the only way that we're going to be able to reduce the amount of microplastics in our waters. So this has been a really successful use of our data. We've been happy to work within these communities. We look forward to working with more communities. Long Hill Township is a community that has shown interest and reached out to us for help in using our data to back up the support of legislation to reduce these plastics. We also work with outreach events, tabling when available at farmers markets, and encouraging community events to reduce those single-use plastics. And we work with, through education with our high schools, helping them to sample plastics to see what's in their local communities. And we've really seen an uptick in the amount of students who are concerned about the plastics in their water and working through their schools to reduce plastic use in the schools. So this has been a really successful program. Moving forward, we will continue with our downstream expansion of sampling, as I mentioned earlier. In 2020, we will be sampling for chemical analysis down through Little Falls. That will also, the Little Falls expansion will also include bacterial analysis and macroinvertebrate sampling where available. As we move downstream and access in the water becomes a little more challenging, finding sites where we can sample for macroinvertebrates again becomes a little more challenging, but we're still looking for those sites. We're always looking for volunteer teams to take new stream reach areas, to do visual assessments. Certainly in our new downstream areas, we're looking for teams to be able to help us gather that frontline data. We always want to promote green infrastructure and smart development. Green infrastructure includes pervious pavement where rain can soak through and allow to percolate down through the ground. Rain gardens. Hazel England, our education director, has been working with schools all along the Passaic to break up their pavement and their parking lots and install rain gardens so that the students can learn about how that recharge of the rainwater through the garden and the soil before the water reaches the streams is really an important part of keeping our water quality high, our flooding down, and our stream reaches healthy. And finally, as always, we work to protect and improve the waters all along the Passaic River through advocacy and land management. 2019 water quality program was funded in part by generous grants from the Watershed Institute, the Levins Foundation, Summit Area Public Foundation, Allergan Foundation, First Energy Foundation, and all of our generous GSWA supporters. If you have any questions, Did we get any questions in the comments?
Yeah, there was, 1 second. What water quality impacts might we see from this current lockdown?
So it'll be really interesting. Great Swamp Watershed Association, myself in particular, is continuing to go out and sample in all the areas that are still accessible. We just finished our sampling for the winter before the shutdown. And so it'll be interesting. Our next round of sampling will be in mid-May. And it'll be very interesting to see what kind of impacts our shutdown, a reduction in the, travel, use of roads, even a reduction in the number of people in our parks and local community areas that are adjacent to our streams has on this, on our water quality moving forward. Not really sure yet what sorts of impacts we will expect from this. Beneficial impacts are likely to be a reduction in trash litter found and washed into the streams from our parks as they haven't been used. Potentially an increase in stream buffer areas, as these areas are often areas that fishermen and communities use a lot, and if those buffers are allowed to rebuild naturally with native vegetation, that will hopefully have an impact, a positive impact on the water quality as well. Any other questions can be directed to me at my email address or through our Facebook and Instagram pages. We will monitor those and answer them online moving forward. My email address is sandral@greatswamp.org. And this presentation will be available both on our website as well as on our media pages. And Monday we will post the PowerPoint slides as well as a PDF copy of the full watershed water quality report card for 2019. Thank you very much.